An explosive encounter unfolded the day I met my daughter's in-laws. My daughter's fiancé introduced me as a nobody, but when his father looked at me, his face drained of color. He turned to his son and said, "Do you want to go to jail?" My daughter's fiancé froze, speechless. Betrayal and justice were about to collide. One truth was enough to destroy an evening, a wedding, and someone's future. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what time it is where you are right now. "Dad, I'm getting married." The Chicago Tribune slipped from my hands, landing with a dull thud on the hardwood beside my leather armchair. Lydia stood near the fireplace, her fingers twisting something that caught the light, a diamond ring I'd never seen before. "To whom?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't even know this guy." She shifted uneasily, the ring spinning around her finger like a nervous habit already formed. "His name is Brian Harper. And yes, you're right. You don't know him yet." Yet? As if that somehow made things better instead of infinitely worse. I folded the newspaper slowly, buying time to think. Lydia wore her navy business suit, the one she saved for big client meetings. She had planned this talk carefully, even chosen her armor. "How long have you two been together?" I asked, though her fidgeting already told me I wouldn't like the answer. "2 weeks," she said quickly, almost defensively. "But Dad, it's real love. I know how that sounds, but 2 weeks?" I rose to my feet, glasses slipping down my nose. "Lydia, people don't get engaged after 2 weeks. They barely know each other's middle names after 2 weeks. She moved closer to the fireplace, gripping the mantel. Family photos stared down at us. Her graduation, camping trips, birthdays. Moments that took decades to build, now seemingly outweighed by 14 days with a stranger. "You always do this," she snapped. "You analyze everything like it's a court case. Not everything needs to be cross-examined, Dad. When my daughter tells me she's marrying a man I've never met." "Yes, it does." The ring caught the light again as she gestured sharply. "Round cut, maybe 2 carats. White gold, expensive. Too expensive for someone she'd known 2 weeks, unless he was wealthy or reckless. Brian makes me happy," she said. "Happier than I've been in years." "Isn't that enough?" "Happy is good," I said carefully. "Marriage is permanent." She laughed without humor. "Nothing's permanent anymore, Dad. You of all people should know that." The jab landed. My divorce from her mother, 8 years ago, was still fair game. Fair point, poorly timed. That's exactly why you shouldn't rush into... Into what? Love? A chance at something real. She grabbed her purse, a sign she was ready to leave. "I want to control every part of my life, like you controlled every case on your desk. I want to protect you." "From what?" "Being happy." Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. Through the open window drifted the hum of evening traffic, neighbors returning to their safe, predictable lives. Lydia's shoulders softened. "Look, I didn't come to fight. I came to share good news. And ask if you'd like to meet him." "Of course I want to meet him," I said. The prosecutor in me added silently, "I want to know everything about him." "Good." She adjusted her purse and twisted the ring again. "We could have dinner somewhere nice." "Tomorrow's too soon, but maybe Monday." "Monday's fine," I said. It gave me the weekend to think, to prepare questions. "Where?" "The Capitol Grill downtown." 7 o'clock. An expensive choice. Either she wanted to impress me, or he was the kind of man who expected expensive restaurants. "I'll make the reservation," I said. She nodded, tension easing slightly. "You'll like him, Dad. He's confident, successful, ambitious." Confident, successful, ambitious. Engaged to my daughter after 2 weeks. In my experience, men who moved that fast were usually running, either from something or towards something that couldn't wait. "I'm sure I will," I lied smoothly. She moved toward the door, her heels tapping across the hardwood. "Brian's excited to meet you too. He's heard so much about you." That made me pause. What exactly has he heard? Just that you're my dad. That you're retired now, enjoying the quiet life. She hesitated. "I didn't mention what you used to do." I figured that could come up naturally. Smart girl. She knew how people changed once they found out a former state prosecutor was in the room. "See you Monday then," she said, opening the door. Cool September air drifted in, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. She stepped onto the porch, then turned back. "Dad, Try to give him a chance, please." I nodded, though she knew in my world giving someone a chance and investigating them thoroughly weren't mutually exclusive. The door closed softly, leaving me alone with my thoughts and an expensive dinner reservation to make. Saturday morning found me in my home office, coffee growing cold beside a wall of family photos. Lydia at 7, gap-toothed and proud with her first swim trophy. 16, rolling her eyes at her junior prom. 25, raising a champagne glass at her promotion. Nowhere in those pictures was a Brian Harper. I'd spent a restless night analyzing our conversation like evidence in a case file. 2 weeks. The timeline bothered me more than I'd admitted. In 30 years as a prosecutor, I'd learned to trust my instincts about people who move too fast. The notebook on my desk held just 3 lines. Brian Harper works in tech IT. Engaged to Lydia after 2 weeks. Pathetically little data for someone about to become my son-in-law. At exactly 10 my phone rang. "Dad." Lydia's voice was smaller, less sure. I wanted to apologize for getting defensive. No need to. People defend those they care about. I leaned back, watching Mrs. Patterson walk her ancient retriever outside. Normal Saturday scenes, the kind Lydia used to be part of. "I know this seems sudden," she continued. "I know how it looks from your side." "How does it look from yours?" A pause. "Like the best thing that's ever happened to me." Her conviction was real, which somehow made it worse. True believers were the hardest to reason with. "Tell me about him," I said, pen in hand. "What does he do in tech?" "So he's a project manager at a software company, IT solutions for businesses." She was warming up now, eager to sell me on him. "He's smart, funny, makes me laugh every day." I wrote project manager in my notebook, vague enough to mean almost anything. "What's his background, family?" "His parents live in the suburbs. Lincoln Park area. His dad's retired police, actually." "You two might have things in common." Retired police, interesting. Kids from law enforcement families either rebelled against authority or embraced it completely. Given Brian's rush to marry, I'd bet on the former. "And his last name's Harper?" "Yes, Brian Harper." She even spelled it out. "Middle name James, if you're keeping a file." Smart girl. She knew me too well. "What made you say yes so quickly?" I finally asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "Have you ever met someone and felt like you've been waiting for them your whole life?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Her mother. 34 years ago. That love gave me Lydia and lasted 18 years before collapsing spectacularly." "But I didn't say that." "I have," I told her instead. "Then you understand. Brian and I just fit like puzzle pieces." I looked at her graduation photo again, remembering her speech about taking time to find herself, about never settling. That cautious young woman felt far away from the one marrying a stranger. "So Monday night," I said, steering us back. 7 at the Capitol Grill? He's really looking forward to it. Wants to make a good impression. I'm sure he does. Dad, be nice." "I'm always nice." She laughed. The sound of my old Lydia for just a second. "You're always polite." "That's not the same thing." "Fair point," I said. "Prosecutorial politeness could cut sharper than open hostility." "I'll be on my best behavior." "Thank you, and Dad, don't Google him, okay? Give him a chance to introduce himself properly." The request caught me off guard. "Why would you think I'd—" "Because I know you," she said, teasing gently. "You probably already have a notebook with his name in it." I glanced down at the open notebook and felt a flicker of pride. My daughter knew me well. "I'll see you Monday," I said, neither confirming nor denying. After hanging up, I called the Capitol Grill. The hostess confirmed a table for 3 at 7, quiet corner away from the crowd. Brian Harper. The name circled in my thoughts. Familiar somehow, though I couldn't place where. Probably nothing. Harper was a common name. 30 years of prosecuting cases meant I'd seen thousands of names. Still, the unease lingered as I closed the notebook and headed downstairs to make breakfast. 2 days. That's how long I had before meeting the man who wanted to marry my daughter. 2 days to prepare the right questions. The Capitol Grill buzzed with its usual Monday night rhythm. Business dinners, client meetings, the soft clink of crystal and cutlery. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table with a full view of the entrance. Old courthouse habits die hard. Always control the environment when possible. At 7:10, Lydia appeared in the doorway wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Her arm was looped through that of a tall man in a charcoal grey suit. Even from across the room I could sense his confidence, the kind that came off not as charm but ownership, the way he scanned the restaurant as if he belonged to it. Brian Harper, and the moment I saw his face something clicked, a flicker of recognition I couldn't quite place. I'd seen that face before, somewhere. "Sorry we're late," Lydia said as they approached. "Traffic was murder." "No problem at all," I said, standing to greet them. I extended my hand. "Mr. Harper, pleasure to meet you." His grip was firm, almost aggressive. "Mr. Willis, the pleasure's all mine," he replied. "Lydia's told me so much about you. All good, I hope." "Oh, definitely." His smile was practiced, the kind I'd seen too many times in court. The smile of a man trying to charm his way out of trouble. "She says you're enjoying retirement. Must be nice, and all that time on your hands." We took our seats. Brian pulled out Lydia's chair with the polished ease of someone rehearsed in gestures that weren't entirely genuine. "So what line of work are you in, Mr. Harper?" I asked as we browsed the menus. "Various projects," he said, eyes still on the wine list. "IT consulting, mostly. Nothing too specific or exciting. You know how it is. Corporate solutions, business optimization, that sort of thing. Vague, deliberately so. In my experience, anyone who couldn't clearly define their work usually didn't have legitimate work." "And you, Mr. Willis?" Brian looked up at me now, his expression politely curious. "What did you do before retirement?" "I was a prosecutor," I said evenly. "State's attorney's office." The shift in his expression was slight but undeniable, a flicker around the eyes, a tightening of the jaw. Most people reacted to that revelation one of two ways: respect or discomfort. Brian fell firmly into the second category. "A prosecutor," he repeated, his smile stiff. "That must have been intense work." It had its moments. The waiter appeared, saving him from further comment. Brian ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, Wagyu, of course, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I ordered the salmon. His eyebrows lifted slightly at my modest choice. "So how did you two meet?" I asked once the waiter had gone. Lydia launched into her story. A chance meeting at a coffee shop downtown, Brian offering her a seat during the lunch rush, hours of conversation that followed. She glowed as she spoke, her hand resting lightly on his across the table. Brian watched her with an expression that suggested deep affection, though his eyes kept darting back to me, measuring, calculating. "Lydia mentioned your parents live nearby," I said once she finished. "Lincoln Park," he confirmed easily. "Dad's retired police. Mom volunteers at the local church. Pretty standard setup. Law enforcement father, church-going mother, and a son who couldn't explain his job." The contradictions were stacking up. Our appetizers arrived, giving me a moment to study him more closely. The expensive suit, the controlled posture, the way he commanded attention, all designed to project success. But beneath that polish I caught something else. Unease, maybe guilt. "You know," Brian said suddenly, slicing into his shrimp cocktail, "it's funny meeting you like this. Here's Lydia. Successful career, great family." He gestured vaguely with his fork. "And then there's you, enjoying your golden years. All that empty space to fill." The insult was surgical. Empty space. As if my life had already been reduced to waiting out the clock. "Brian," Lydia hissed, eyes wide. "No, it's fine," I said calmly, letting the familiar prosecutor's stillness take over. "Retirement does provide more flexibility in one's schedule." "Exactly," he said with a grin. "Must be liberating. Not having any real responsibilities anymore." Another jab. This one aimed to make me irrelevant. I caught Lydia's apologetic glance and gave her a subtle nod. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. In under 20 minutes, Brian Harper had shown himself to be evasive about his career, anxious about my past, and comfortable disrespecting the man he hoped would become his father-in-law. And that face, and I knew it. I just couldn't yet place where. "So," I said, changing the subject before Lydia could scold him, "have you two set a date?" "Soon," Brian said, taking a long drink of wine. "Life's too short to wait. When you know, you know. How soon is soon?" "We're thinking November," Lydia jumped in quickly. "Small ceremony. Just close family. 6 weeks away. faster than I expected. When the main courses arrived, Brian examined his $40 steak with theatrical reverence. "Now this," he declared, cutting precisely into the meat, "is what a steak should look like. Perfectly marbled, properly aged." He glanced at my salmon with barely concealed smirk. "Though I suppose fish is lighter. Easier to digest at your age." The comment landed like a slap. I tightened my grip on the napkin under the table, forcing my jaw to stay still. 30 years of cross-examinations had trained me for moments like this. "The salmon here is excellent," Lydia interjected quickly, shooting him a sharp look. "Oh, I'm sure," Brian said, waving his fork dismissively. "But there's just something about a real piece of meat that energizes you, keeps you sharp, active." He took another smug bite. "Though, of course, that probably matters less when your most strenuous activity is reading the newspaper." I kept slicing my salmon, each cut identical, methodical. When under attack, maintain composure. "Brian," Lydia warned, her tone razor-thin, "maybe we could talk about something else." "What?" "We're just chatting," he said, leaning back, his voice louder now. A nearby couple turned to look. "I think it's great that your dad's found his, what do you call it? His groove in retirement, very zen, very accepting of life's natural progression." Natural progression? As if I were already halfway buried. The wine had loosened him. His voice carried easily through the room, drawing curious glances from neighboring tables, fellow professionals who understood restraint. Brian didn't notice, or didn't care. "You know what I love about our generation," he continued, gesturing with his glass. "We don't accept limits. We innovate. We move forward." He flashed me what he likely thought was a winning smile. Not like the older generation, always talking about how things used to be. Always living in the past. "Dad," Lydia's voice cracked with embarrassment. "The past," Brian interrupted, laughing too loudly for the elegant space. "That's where all the wisdom supposedly lives, right? Except the world moved on while you were busy collecting it." He took another gulp. "Times are changing, Mr. Willis. The older generation just can't keep up." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Conversations around us slowed. Diners were listening now, watching. I set my fork down with quiet precision. "Interesting perspective," I said softly. But Brian wasn't finished. Emboldened by what he mistook for patience, he pressed harder. "Don't get me wrong, I respect experience. But at some point, you have to step aside and let the people who understand the modern world take over." He gestured between himself and Lydia. "Let the next generation build something meaningful instead of just existing. As if 30 years of public service, a career built on justice and integrity, meant nothing." Lydia's face had gone pale. "Brian, stop." "Stop what?" "I'm just being honest." He laughed again, loud and sharp. That bragging kind of laughter designed to fill a room, to dominate it. "Honesty's refreshing, don't you think, Mr. Willis? Better than pretending everything's fine when really you're just marking time until enough." The single word sliced through his drunken monologue like a blade. Brian froze. Something in my tone broke through his wine-soaked arrogance. The restaurant fell silent. Even the soft clinking of silverware paused, as if the entire room sensed a shift. I folded my napkin slowly, deliberately, the same way I'd once organized evidence before delivering a closing statement. Then I placed it beside my plate and looked directly at Brian Harper. I really looked at him then, with the full weight of every courtroom victory, every conviction, every criminal I'd ever put away. "Lydia," I said, my voice calm but laced with authority, the kind that made Brian's eyes widen just slightly. "Would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment?" Brian blinked, confusion replacing the smug confidence that had colored his features moments earlier. "Outside?" "But we haven't finished. The grown-ups need to talk," I said, still looking only at Lydia. The insult was deliberate, precise, delivered with the same surgical accuracy Brian had been using on me all evening. His face flushed red, but for once he seemed at a loss for words. Lydia's hands trembled slightly as she placed her napkin on the table. "Dad, I don't think, please." Something in my tone made her stop. She nodded instead. We rose together, leaving Brian sitting alone at the table, his expensive steak growing cold while the eyes of nearby diners followed us in silent fascination. The walk through the restaurant felt endless. Past tables of professionals pretending not to stare. Past waiters who stepped aside with quiet understanding. Past the hostess, whose polite smile faltered as we passed. The cool September air hit us like relief after the suffocating tension inside. The parking lot was dimly lit, shadows stretching long between rows of expensive cars. Downtown Chicago hummed around us, the low roar of traffic, the occasional wail of a siren, the familiar pulse of a Monday night in the city. We stopped between a BMW and a Mercedes, far enough from the entrance to speak freely. What was that? Lydia's voice trembled with a mix of anger and embarrassment. What just happened in there? That, I said evenly, was your fiancé showing his true colors. His true colors? She spun to face me, her heels clicking sharply against the asphalt. You mean being nervous about meeting my father for the first time? You mean trying to make conversation and maybe having a little too much wine? Lydia, that man spent 20 minutes insulting me to my face. He was trying to be friendly. She snapped. You're the one who sat there like a judge, analyzing every word he said. The comparison stung, because it was partially true. 30 years of reading people, of sorting truth from lies, of protecting the innocent from predators. That doesn't just vanish because you traded a prosecutor's badge for a retirement watch. I don't like him, I said simply. You don't like him. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. You've decided that after one dinner? After watching him be nervous and awkward? After watching him disrespect you? Disrespect me and lie about everything, from his job to his intentions. Lie about what? What lies, Dad? IT consulting, various projects. Lydia, the man can't give a straight answer about what he does for work. Not everyone needs to interrogate people for a living. The words hit harder than any of Brian's barbs. Something inside my chest cracked. The careful distance I'd been maintaining suddenly gone. Is that what you think I did? Interrogate people? Didn't you? Her voice wavered, eyes glistening. Isn't that exactly what you're doing right now? Putting my boyfriend on trial because he doesn't meet your standards. Your fiancé, I corrected, and my standards include basic respect and honesty. Your standards include control. The tears spilled freely now, but her anger burned hotter. You can't stand that I'm independent, that I made a choice without your approval. This isn't about independence. Then what is it about, really? She demanded, stepping closer, her voice low and fierce. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just can't handle the fact that your little girl grew up and doesn't need Daddy's permission anymore. The parking lot fell silent, except for our breathing and the faint rush of passing cars. A light rain began to fall, misting the streetlights and casting soft halos over the wet pavement. I love him, Dad. Her voice broke on the words. For the first time in my life, I found someone who makes me feel complete. And instead of being happy for me, you're trying to tear it apart. Lydia, no! She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I'm 32 years old. I don't need you to protect me from my own decisions, even when those decisions are mistakes. Even then, I asked quietly, especially then. The rain grew heavier now, droplets glinting in the yellow light between us. I watched my daughter, this fierce, brilliant woman I'd raised, preparing to walk away for a man who had treated us both like jokes. Lyd, please, just listen. I'm done listening. She fumbled in her purse for her keys, her hands shaking. I'm done with your suspicions and your interrogations and your need to control every aspect of my life. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From being happy? She found her keys and pressed the button. Her car's headlights flashed in response. She opened the door, then turned back one last time. You know what, Dad? For someone who spent his whole career fighting for justice, you sure don't trust people to make their own choices. The car door slammed, the sound echoing off the wet asphalt and nearby buildings. I stood in the growing rain, watching my daughter's taillights fade into the Chicago night, leaving me alone with the weight of every word I should have said differently. My phone felt heavy in my jacket pocket, but I didn't reach for it, not yet. Inside, Brian Harper was probably finishing his steak, already spinning the story of how Lydia's controlling father had ruined their perfect evening. And maybe for the first time in my life, the prosecutor had gotten it completely wrong. The coffee maker gurgled to life at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual. I'd given up on sleep around 4, replaying every word of our argument. Every moment I could have chosen differently. My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than it had yesterday. Still wearing the wrinkled shirt from dinner, I looked exactly like what Brian Harper had accused me of being, a tired old man living in the past. The first sip of coffee burned my tongue. I barely noticed. By 8, I was pacing the house, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Lydia's contact. The family photos on the wall seemed to mock me. Lydia at 5, gap-toothed and trusting. Lydia at 16, rolling her eyes but still letting me drive her to prom. Lydia at 25, hugging me at graduation. When had I become the enemy in her story? The phone rang 4 times before voicemail. Her voice was bright, professional. "You've reached Lydia Willis. Please leave a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." I hung up without speaking. 10 minutes later, I tried again. Same result. This time, I forced myself to leave a message. "Lydia, it's Dad. Please call me back." The words sounded hollow, inadequate. 30 years of courtroom eloquence, reduced to a stammered apology. I moved to my office, sitting in the same chair where I'd prepared countless cases, cross-examined witnesses in my head, built arguments that decided lives. Now I couldn't even build a simple apology to my own daughter. The morning news murmured from the TV, but I wasn't watching. I stared at my phone, willing it to ring. When it didn't, I called again. "Lyd, I'm sorry. I worry about you. Please forgive me." The second voicemail sounded even more desperate than the first. By noon, I'd called 6 times, each message worse than the last. A slow descent from concern to helpless pleading. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be." I handled that badly. "Lydia, please. I'm not trying to control your life. I'm trying to understand it. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't trust people to make their own choices, but I trust you. I've always trusted you." Each unanswered call felt like a small death. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, making sure the volume was up, terrified I'd somehow miss her call. The afternoon dragged endlessly. I made lunch but couldn't eat, tried reading but couldn't focus, turned on the TV but stared at my silent phone instead. At 4 o'clock, I started typing messages I couldn't bring myself to send. "Lydia, I'm sorry about last night." Delete. "Please call me when you get a chance." Delete. "I love you." Delete. The cursor blinked at me accusingly from the empty message field. By 6 p.m. the silence had grown unbearable. I called one more time, fully aware she wouldn't answer, knowing I was probably only making things worse. "I love you, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Just talk to me." The words came out broken, desperate. An old man pleading with his daughter's voicemail reduced to begging for scraps of attention. I set the phone down on my desk and stared out the window. The September sunset painted the yard in shades of gold and amber, the same hues that once glowed in Lydia's hair when she was little, running to greet me at the door every evening after work. Now she wouldn't even return my calls. The phone stayed silent through dinner, through the evening news, through my half-hearted attempt to read case files that no longer meant anything. By 9, I sat alone in darkness. The phone rested on the nightstand, its screen black and unyielding. Maybe Brian Harper had been right all along. Maybe I was just empty space now, a relic from an age when fathers were still allowed to protect their daughters from obvious mistakes. Or maybe, for the first time in my professional life, I had cross-examined the wrong person. "Tomorrow," I told myself, staring at the ceiling. "Tomorrow she'll call back." But even as I whispered it, I knew the lie in those words. Lydia Willis had inherited her mother's stubbornness and her father's pride. She wouldn't call back tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that. I'd won my last case 30 years ago. This one, the only one that truly mattered, I'd lost before it even began. 3 weeks into October, I'd perfected the art of invisible surveillance. Parked across from Brian's townhouse in Lincoln Park, engine idling for warmth, I watched my daughter's morning routine through condensation-fogged glass. 7:45 a.m. always the same. Lydia emerged in her navy coat, coffee cup in hand, briefcase slung over her shoulder. She never looked toward my car. The first week after our argument, I hadn't been subtle. Phone calls every few hours. Flowers delivered to Brian's address. Awkward visits. Me standing on his immaculate front steps, pressing the doorbell and waiting. Brian ended that quickly enough. "Get lost, old man," he'd shouted one Tuesday morning, still in pajamas, his voice echoing through the gentrified street. "You're not welcome here." The neighbors had watched from their windows, coffee cups frozen halfway to their lips, as I retreated to my sedan with whatever dignity I could salvage. Mrs. Patterson's retriever would have shown more backbone. October arrived with its usual Chicago bluntness. Cold mornings that made your breath visible, leaves turning the color of old photographs. I spent those days learning the geography of my daughter's new life, the coffee shop she stopped at on Wednesdays, the dry cleaner she used, the grocery store where we'd had our most painful encounter. Whole Foods, Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks into my quiet campaign of observation. I was selecting apples when I saw her, brows furrowed, comparing bell pepper prices with that same laser focus she'd inherited from me. For a fleeting moment, watching her, I forgot we weren't speaking. "Liddy." She looked up, and for a heartbeat her face lit up in automatic recognition. Then reality crashed back. The smile died, her shoulders stiffened, and she abandoned her cart right there between the kale and the spinach. I followed her retreat through the aisles, past startled shoppers who probably thought I was some kind of stalker. By the time I reached the parking lot, her sedan was already pulling away, leaving me standing beside a row of shopping carts with a single bag of apples. The security guard approached, polite but firm. "Everything okay, sir?" "Just missed my daughter," I said, which was true in more ways than one. Now, as I watched her car disappear into morning traffic from my parked spot, I wondered if this was how my professional targets had felt. Observed, catalogued, reduced to patterns and routines. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop watching the house or I'll call the cops." Brian, obviously. I started the car and drove off, but not before noting the time in my small notebook. 7:52 a.m. Lydia's commute took exactly 7 minutes from her door to the main road. The afternoons were harder. Nothing to watch, nowhere to go, no reason to be in Lincoln Park. So I drove random routes through the city, past the park where I'd taught her to ride a bike, the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated her college acceptance, the courthouse where she'd joined me for lunch during law school. All of it felt archaeological now, relics of a bond that might never be repaired. The worst part was the voicemails, each one shorter than the last, my eloquence decaying with each passing day. "Lydia, it's Dad, day 14 of this. I'm not giving up." "Lydia, I saw Halloween decorations in your neighborhood. Remember when you dressed as a prosecutor for Trick or Treat? You used my old briefcase. I know you're getting married soon. I want to be there." By week 3, I'd stopped leaving messages altogether. Her recorded voice had become too painful, too sharp a reminder of what a real conversation used to sound like. The police officer who knocked on my window one Thursday evening was surprisingly kind. "Evening, sir." We had a report of suspicious activity. I handed him my license and said I was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. He looked about my age, maybe a few years younger. Tired eyes. The kind that had seen enough domestic heartbreak to recognize the pattern. "Might want to try a different approach," he said gently. "Sometimes space is the only thing that works." Space. I had 40 years of space ahead of me, retirement stretching like an empty highway toward a horizon I didn't want to reach. But I had one thing left: patience. 30 years of building cases had taught me that success lived in the details, that justice came only to those willing to wait. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, October 19th, 3 days away according to the calendar on my kitchen wall. I'd circled the date in red. Lydia still hadn't sent an invitation. The crossword blurred in front of me as I wrestled with 7 across, reconciliation after conflict, 9 letters. The phone rang before I could solve it. Lydia's name lit up the screen. My heart skipped, a dangerous thing for a 65-year-old man. I answered before the second ring. "Dad." Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, hesitant. "It's Lydia." "Lyd." I set down my glasses, half afraid I was dreaming. "I'm glad you called." "The wedding is Saturday," she said quickly. 3 days from now. I know it's short notice, but Brian's parents want to meet you. They insist. A family dinner before the ceremony. Relief and terror collided in my chest. Of course. I'd be honored to meet them. "Really?" She sounded surprised, as if bracing for an argument. "Because they're very traditional. Brian's father especially. He has..." strong opinions about family. I understand, I said, already reaching for a pen. When and where? Tomorrow night, Friday. At Brian's house, our house. 7 o'clock. I could hear her office in the background. Phones ringing, papers shuffling. She was calling from work, stealing a few minutes to rebuild the bridge we'd burned. Dad, I need to ask you something. Anything. Can you just be yourself? Not the prosecutor version. Just my dad. The request stung, but I understood. She didn't want cross-examinations or character judgments. She wanted the man who taught her to ride a bike, not the one who grilled witnesses. I'll be on my best behavior, I promised. Thank you. Relief softened her voice. And Dad, I'm sorry about everything I said in the parking lot. I was angry. You don't need to apologize. I handled it wrong from the start. No, you were trying to protect me. I know that. I've always known that. Silence lingered, a fragile peace settling between us. I could hear her breathing, could picture her at her desk, nervously twirling her hair like she used to as a little girl. So Friday night, I said, easing us back to safe ground. Should I bring anything? Maybe flowers for Evelyn, Brian's mom. She loves orchids. And Dad. Her voice softened again. Thank you for agreeing to this. It means everything to me. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, I said quietly. After hanging up, I stared at the crossword again. 7 across, reconciliation after conflict. 9 letters. The answer came to me all at once. Peacemaking. I filled it in carefully, then reached for my notebook. Tomorrow night's dinner would require planning, precision, and strategy. Just like every major case I'd ever handled. But this time the verdict wasn't about justice or guilt. It was about my daughter's future, and my place within it. The grandfather clock chimed 2:30. 28.5 hours until I met the people who'd raised the man marrying my daughter. Time to start preparing. 30 years of casework had taught me. Success lived in the details. And this dinner would be no different. My closet offered the wardrobe of a man who had spent decades inside courtrooms. Conservative suits, understated ties, shoes polished to a mirror shine. But this wasn't a trial. I needed to convey respect without intimidation, authority without arrogance. I chose my charcoal suit, the one Lydia had complimented during her college graduation, a navy tie with faint silver threads, trustworthy, not flashy, black Oxfords, freshly resoled, the image of a retired professional who understood propriety, not power. Thursday afternoon found me at the florist on Oak Park Avenue, where Mrs. Chen had been arranging flowers for over 30 years. She listened to my explanation with the patience of someone well-versed in men fumbling through emotional territory. Orchids for the mother, she repeated, jotting notes. First meeting with future in-laws, very important. She peered at me over her reading glasses. White orchids. Classic, respectful. Not too expensive, not too cheap. Perfect. She tapped her pen. And for the father, former police officer, yes, maybe a bottle of wine. Something appropriate for dinner hosts. I nodded, grateful. That sounds right. She smiled knowingly. Wine shop 2 blocks down. Tell them Mrs. Chen sent you. They'll help you pick something suitable. At the wine shop, the owner, a former prosecutor who'd retired 5 years before me, understood my mission instantly. Together we selected a mid-range California Cabernet. Good enough to show respect, not so lavish it looked like bribery. Friday morning brought final preparations. I showered with unusual care, shaved twice to erase any shadow, trimmed nose hairs I'd ignored for weeks. The mirror reflected a man preparing for the most important performance of his life, and in many ways that's exactly what it was. I practiced introductions while knotting my tie. Mr. Harper, Mrs. Harper, it's a pleasure to meet you. Firm handshake, steady eye contact, genuine smile. Thank you for welcoming me into your son's home. The flowers arrived at 4 o'clock sharp. White orchids in an elegant arrangement, sophisticated yet restrained. Mrs. Chen had tucked in a small card that read, "For building bridges." In my notebook lay 3 pages of research and strategy. Brian's father, retired Chicago police officer, likely valued hierarchy, directness, results. His mother, traditional values, church volunteer, family-centered. Both would be protective of their son. Both suspicious of the father, who had caused a month-long rift. I couldn't afford another mistake. By 6:15 p.m., I stood in front of the hallway mirror, making final adjustments. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking the minutes until a dinner that could either mend my relationship with Lydia or shatter it completely. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Thank you for doing this, Dad. It means everything." I typed back quickly, "See you soon, sweetheart." Then I picked up the orchids, collected the wine from the counter, and stepped out into the crisp October evening. Chicago spread before me in all its autumn brilliance. Time to meet the enemy, or with any luck, my daughter's new family. The townhouse rose like a monument to new money, 3 stories of glass and steel towering above Lincoln Park's tree-lined streets. I parked neatly between a BMW and a Tesla, checking my reflection one last time in the rearview mirror. The orchid sat pristine beside me, the wine label catching the streetlight. This was enemy territory, and I was walking in unarmed. Brian opened the door before I could ring the bell, his smile sharp as a prosecutor's cross-examination. Well, our distinguished retiree has arrived." "Good evening, Brian." I held out the flowers. "These are for your mother." He examined them theatrically, turning the arrangement like a judge assessing evidence. "How thoughtful. Very traditional. Mom loves flowers, though she's more into exotic varieties these days. Still, she'll appreciate the gesture." The backhanded nature of his response didn't escape me. Everything about Brian Harper was a performance. Every word designed to assert dominance through subtle diminishment. "And wine for your father," I said, offering the Cabernet. California." His eyebrows lifted. "Dad's more of a bourbon man, but I'm sure he'll adapt." Come in. Welcome to our home. Our home." The possessive pronoun hung in the air like cigarette smoke. Inside, the place screamed expense without warmth. Minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, abstract art that looked like investment portfolios, and technology embedded in every surface. "This is impressive," I said, because some response was required. "Isn't it?" His chest swelled with pride. "Everything's custom. That entertainment system alone costs more than most people make in 6 months. But when you're in high-level IT consulting, you learn to appreciate quality." Lydia appeared from the kitchen, wearing a simple black dress that made her look older, more poised, or maybe it was just the tension around her eyes. "Dad," she kissed my cheek, relief softening her expression. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." Brian was already at the bar, pouring drinks from a setup that belonged in a 5-star hotel. Scotch wine, or maybe something softer, for the older generation. The older generation. Another jab, this time wrapped in politeness, as if experience were a liability instead of wisdom. "Scotch is fine," I said evenly. He handed me a crystal tumbler filled with premium liquor, then launched into a grand tour of his possessions, the sound system that could recreate Carnegie Hall, the kitchen appliances that belonged in a Michelin restaurant, and the bathroom fixtures imported straight from Italy. "Brian," Lydia's voice cut through his monologue, gentle but firm. "Maybe Dad would like to sit down." Of course," he said, pretending embarrassment. "Sorry, I get excited showing off the place." He gestured toward a leather sectional that probably cost more than my first car. "Make yourself comfortable, Mr. Willis, though I suppose comfort is relative when you're used to. Simpler accommodations. My Oak Park home, with its hardwood floors, built-in bookcases, and decades of family photos, apparently qualified as poverty in Brian Harper's world. "I'm quite comfortable, thank you." Lydia perched on the edge of her chair, her wine glass trembling slightly. I could see it in her eyes now, the slow realization of what I'd tried to warn her about 5 weeks ago. Her fiancé was a man who measured worth in dollars and treated people like acquisitions. Brian leaned back like a king on his throne. Tomorrow's the big day. Hard to believe Lydia's finally ready to settle down. She's been so independent for so long. The word independent dripped with implication, like it was a flaw, something he'd corrected by putting a ring on her finger. "Independence is a virtue," I said quietly. I raised her to think for herself. "Oh, absolutely," he said smoothly. "Though there comes a time when thinking for yourself becomes thinking for two. Marriage is about compromise, about letting the stronger partner lead. Letting the stronger partner lead." The mask was slipping. The arrogance beneath the charm was showing. The doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. "That'll be Mom and Dad," Brian said, rising with anticipation. Time to meet the family. He strode toward the door. I caught Lydia's eye. She looked trapped, caught between loyalty and humiliation, between love and the realization that her father might have been right all along. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, but her trembling hands told another story. Brian's voice boomed from the hallway, full of showmanship. "Mom, Dad!" "Perfect timing. Come meet the family." I straightened my tie, standing tall. Whatever came next, I'd face it with the dignity Lydia deserved from her father, even if her fiancé had none. The front door opened to Brian's exuberant greeting echoing through the townhouse. "There they are. Mom, Dad, come in, come in." Orrin Harper entered first, compact, alert, eyes sharp with the reflexes of a man who'd spent decades reading people and situations. Behind him, Evelyn Harper radiated warmth, the kind that made church volunteers indispensable. Silver hair perfectly styled, her smile open and genuine. "Brian's sweetheart," she said with maternal affection, wrapping her son in a hug. Orrin's handshake was firmer, his expression measured. His gaze swept the room, cataloguing exits, objects, faces, with the efficiency of old law enforcement instinct. When his eyes landed on me, everything changed. His posture stiffened. The color drained from his face like water spilling from a cracked glass. "Mom, Dad," Brian announced with theatrical pride, gesturing toward me. "Meet the empty space." The words hit the air like a physical blow. Lydia gasped. Evelyn's smile faltered, but Orrin Harper's reaction was immediate, seismic. His hand shot out, gripping Brian's arm with the urgency of a man stopping a disaster. "Brian!" His voice was sharp, commanding. "Kitchen, now!" "Dad, what now?" Orrin's tone brooked no argument. It was the voice of authority, honed by years of crisis management. They disappeared into the adjoining kitchen, but the townhouse's open layout made privacy impossible. Their urgent whispers carried clearly through the tension-filled air, while Evelyn, Lydia, and I stood frozen in awkward silence. "Do you want to go to prison?" Orrin's voice cut through the air, tight with panic. "What are you talking about?" Brian hissed back. "That man, do you even know who he is? He's just some retiree. Lydia's dad, lives on a pension, plays golf, reads newspapers." Orrin's reply came out as a harsh whisper, each word sharp enough to draw blood. "That's former Illinois State Prosecutor Gus Willis." The words hit like a gunshot. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. But he said he was retired." Brian's voice shrank, suddenly unsure. "He is retired," Orrin snapped. "But Gus Willis doesn't stop being Gus Willis just because he turned in his badge. That man has connections in every law enforcement agency, from here to Washington. He could destroy you with a single phone call." "Destroy me? Why would he?" Brian's voice cracked, realization dawning like slow thunder. "Because you just introduced the most respected prosecutor in Illinois history as empty space, you absolute fool." In the living room, Evelyn was valiantly trying to maintain normal conversation, her years of hostess training fighting to hold back the chaos brewing in the kitchen. "Lydia, dear, your dress is lovely. And, Mr. Willis, it's so wonderful to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Harper," I replied smoothly, though my eyes were fixed on the kitchen doorway, on the silhouettes of father and son, locked in urgent, whispered debate. "He knows, doesn't he?" Brian's voice trembled, barely audible. "About Chicago." If he doesn't know yet," Orrin cut in grimly. "He will by morning. Men like Gus Willis don't forget faces. And they sure as hell don't forget cases." "What do I do?" "You grovel," Orrin said flatly. "You apologize. You pray to whatever power you believe in that he's here as a father, not a prosecutor, and you never ever insult him again." The kitchen fell silent. Footsteps approached. Brian appeared first, his face pale as courthouse marble, followed by his father, whose expression screamed damage control. "Mr. Willis." Orrin's tone was low, measured, respectful, the way one officer addresses another of higher rank. "I believe we may have met before, professionally." I set my scotch down with deliberate precision and nodded slowly. "We may have, Officer Harper, though I suspect our connection is more recent than you realize." Brian stood frozen, his luxury surroundings suddenly feeling like a courtroom closing in around him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the realization that he'd spent weeks insulting the wrong man. Lydia looked between us, confusion and recognition battling across her face. The truth was surfacing and nothing could stop it now. The silence stretched taut as a wire until I finally broke it with the calm authority honed from 30 years in courtrooms. "Yes," I said evenly. "I was the Illinois State Prosecutor for 15 years. Before that, Assistant Prosecutor for another 15. Brian's knees buckled slightly. He gripped the back of a chair for balance. "But I'm retired now," I continued, turning to address the room. "I'm here tonight as Lydia's father, nothing more. The past is the past." "Oh, my stars," Evelyn breathed, her hand fluttering to her chest. "All those cases in the newspapers, that was you." "Some of them," I said gently. "Yes, ma'am." Brian finally found his voice, though it came out as a ragged whisper. "Sir Mr. Willis, I had no idea who you were." I acted completely inappropriately. "I was disrespectful and rude, and I'm so sorry." The transformation was absolute. The arrogant man who once called me empty space now stood chastened, fully aware of how close he'd come to the edge. Lydia stared at me with new eyes. "Dad, you never told me." "All these years I thought you were just—" "I knew you knew I worked for the state," I said softly. "But I never saw a reason to discuss old cases at home. Work was work. You were my daughter. Those were separate worlds." "The Castellano family," Oren said suddenly, realization hitting. "The municipal corruption cases in '98. The organized crime trials that went on for 3 years. That was you," I nodded. "So you put away some of the most dangerous criminals this state ever saw," he said, awe creeping into his voice. "I worked security for 2 of those trials. Never forgot the prosecutor who wouldn't be intimidated, wouldn't be bought, wouldn't back down." Brian was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "All this time," I said quietly, "everything you said came from someone who didn't know better." Then I looked around the room. "I suggest we move past this. Tomorrow is Lydia's wedding day. That's what matters now." Evelyn, bless her, stepped forward with a warmth that could disarm any tension. "Mr. Willis, would you do us the honor of joining us for dinner? I'd love to hear how you and Lydia's mother met." "I'd be delighted," I said. The next 2 hours transformed everything. Brian, humbled beyond recognition, asked genuine questions about law and justice. Oren shared stories from his patrol days, officer to prosecutor, equal to equal. Evelyn filled the room with laughter, and stories of raising a police officer's son in Chicago. And Lydia. She watched it all unfold in amazement. For the first time, she saw me not as an overprotective retiree, but as the man who had spent 3 decades fighting for truth. During dessert, Brian rose from his seat, nervous but steady. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, voice low but sincere. "To Mr. Willis, who taught me tonight that respect isn't based on what you think you know about someone. It's earned through character, integrity, and the humility to admit when you've been wrong." He lifted his glass. "To new beginnings, to family, and to the honor of learning from someone who spent his life making the world safer for all of us." We drank. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Real remorse, genuine respect, and the faint possibility that maybe, just maybe, Brian Harper could become worthy of my daughter. Later, as we said our goodbyes, Lydia pulled me aside. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes shining, "I'm sorry. For everything I said in that parking lot. For not trusting your judgment. For not realizing who you really were." "You knew exactly who I was," I told her gently. "I was your father. That's the only identity that mattered." She hugged me then, tight, unguarded, and for the first time in 5 weeks, it felt like I had my daughter back. Driving home through the quiet Chicago night, I thought about justice and the many forms it takes. Sometimes it's delivered through verdicts and courtrooms, sometimes through patience and truth revealed at the right time. Tonight it came through both. Tomorrow was the wedding. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I was looking forward to it. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.